The words hit me like a physical blow. You're no longer my son. My mother's voice was ice cold, each syllable sharp enough to cut. I stood in the dining room of Willowmere, the estate where I'd grown up, where Christmas mornings had once felt magical and summer evenings stretched forever. Now the chandelier overhead seemed to glare down at me like a spotlight at an interrogation. My wife Sophie's hand found mine under the table. Our daughter Lily, only 5 years old, looked up at me with confused eyes. She didn't understand why Grandma was yelling at Daddy. I barely understood it myself. Mom, I'm not lying to the police, I said, keeping my voice steady even though my heart was hammering. Marcus was driving. He was drunk. He hit that car. My younger brother Marcus slouched in his chair, guilt written across his face, but his mouth stubbornly shut. My older sister Vanessa set down her wine glass with a click that sounded like a gavel. Jesus, Ethan, she said, her lawyer voice dripping with contempt. It's called loyalty. You protect family. Not by committing perjury, I replied. My mother stood up. Margaret Brooks, at 67, still commanded a room like a queen. Then get out. You're not welcome in this house anymore. You'll inherit nothing from me. Nothing. I felt Sophie pulling me toward the door, felt Lily's small hand gripping my shirt. As we walked out, my mother called after us, "Don't bother coming to my funeral either." Sophie drove because my hands were shaking too badly to hold the wheel. The streetlights blurred past the windows of our old sedan. In the back seat, Lily's voice was small and scared. "Why is Grandma mad at Daddy?" "Grandma made a mistake, sweetie," Sophie said softly. "Is Daddy in trouble?" I couldn't answer. My throat felt like someone had wrapped barbed wire around it. I stared out at the darkness, watching the suburbs give way to our neighborhood, the small split level we bought 3 years ago. It wasn't Willowmere, but it was ours. My phone buzzed. A text from Vanessa. "Hope you're happy. You just cost Marcus his career. Mom's rewriting her will tomorrow. You'll get nothing." Another buzz. "Marcus this time. Thanks a lot, brother." I turned the phone off and let it drop into the cup holder. Sophie reached over and squeezed my knee. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. "I just lost my family," I said. "No," Sophie replied, her voice firm. "You just learned who they really are." When we got home, I tucked Lily into bed and read her 2 extra stories. She fell asleep, holding my hand. I sat there in the dark of her room, listening to her breathe, and wondered if I'd just made the biggest mistake of my life. Or maybe the first right decision in years. 3 days later, the call came from Harold Pemberton. He'd been our family attorney for as long as I could remember, a distinguished man with silver hair and kind eyes who'd always treated me with respect. "Ethan," he said, his voice careful, "I'm required to inform you that your mother has executed a new will." I was in my classroom, after school, grading papers. I set down my red pen. "I know. Vanessa told me." "I see." Harold paused. "Then you know you've been removed as a beneficiary. The estate will be divided between Vanessa and Marcus." "Okay," I said. What else was there to say? "Ethan." Harold's voice softened. "I'm sorry. Your father would be very disappointed. I wish things were different." "It's fine, Harold. I expected it. If you need anything, call me." "I mean that." After we hung up, I sat at my desk staring at the papers in front of me without seeing them. A student's essay on the Civil War. Good thesis, needs work on supporting evidence. My father had died 20 years ago from a heart attack. I was 12. I barely remembered his voice anymore, just the feeling of safety when he was around. That night, Sophie found me in my home office looking at old photos. One in particular, my father and me at a baseball game, both of us grinning, his hand on my shoulder. "Your father wouldn't have let this happen," Sophie said quietly. I looked up at her. "My father's been dead for 20 years. The next 2 years passed like a slow-motion car crash. I sent my mother a birthday card. It came back marked, "Return to sender." When Lily asked why we never visited Grandma anymore, I said Grandma was busy. It felt like the kindest lie. Christmas came and went. Vanessa posted photos on Facebook. The whole family gathered at Willowmere, glasses raised, everyone smiling. I wasn't in any of them. The comments underneath said things like beautiful family and so blessed. My mother replied to one, my 2 wonderful children. 2, not 3. Extended family stopped inviting me to reunions. It's just awkward with your mother there, my cousin explained apologetically. Sophie's parents tried to fill the gap. They were wonderful people, but it wasn't the same. There's a specific kind of pain that comes from being erased by the people who are supposed to love you no matter what. I threw myself into teaching. My students at Jefferson High loved my history classes because I made the past feel alive. I coached the debate team. We won regionals. I was present for every moment of Lily's life. School plays, soccer games, bedtime stories. But there was a shadow over everything now, a sadness I couldn't quite shake. Marcus got arrested again. Public intoxication this time. Vanessa bailed him out. My mother paid for an expensive rehab facility in California. No one called me. No one asked if I wanted to know. Late one night, after Lily was asleep, I whispered to Sophie, "Sometimes I wonder if I should have just lied." She took my face in her hands. "Then you wouldn't be you." Early Tuesday morning, while I was making Lily's lunch for school, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. "Is this Ethan Brooks?" "Yes." "This is Mercy General Hospital. I'm calling regarding Margaret Brooks. Are you her son?" My stomach dropped into my shoes. "Yes." "What happened?" "Your mother was brought in by ambulance early this morning. She suffered a massive stroke." The nurse's voice was professionally gentle. "I'm very sorry, Mr. Brooks, but she didn't survive." The kitchen went silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. The sandwich I'd been making sat half-finished on the counter. Turkey and cheese. Lily's favorite. "Does my sister know?" I asked. "You're listed as the first emergency contact on our older medical records. We're calling the others now." I hung up and just stood there. Sophie came downstairs in her bathrobe, saw my face, and stopped. "What happened?" "My mother's dead." The words felt unreal. 2 years of silence, 2 years of being erased, and now she was gone. There would be no reconciliation, no apology, no chance to fix anything. Just an ending with no resolution. Sophie wrapped her arms around me. I didn't cry. I just felt numb, like someone had wrapped my entire body in cotton wool. Later, I would realize I was in shock. But in that moment, I felt nothing at all. I called Vanessa to ask about funeral arrangements. She answered on the 5th ring. "Why are you calling?" Her voice was cold, businesslike. "Mom died. I want to know when the funeral is. It's family only." The words landed like a slap. "I'm her son." Not according to her. She made it very clear before she died that you weren't to be at her funeral. Vanessa's tone suggested she was reading from a script she'd memorized. "I'm honoring her wishes, Ethan. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Click. I stared at my phone. Sophie had been listening from the doorway. "You're going anyway, right?" "I don't know," I admitted. "She didn't want me there." "She's dead," Sophie said bluntly. "She doesn't get a vote anymore. But you have to live with your choices. What can you live with?" That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the last time I'd seen my mother. Her face twisted with anger as she shouted at me to get out. I thought about all the times before that when I'd bitten my tongue, when I'd smoothed things over, when I'd been the peacemaker. For what? To end up here anyway? But I also thought about my father. What would he have wanted? The answer came clearly. He'd want me to take the high road, even if it hurt. Especially if it hurt. "I'm going," I told Sophie the next morning. She nodded. "I'll stay home with Lily. But I'm proud of you." The funeral was at St. Catherine's, the historic church downtown where my parents had been married 40 years ago. Expensive flower arrangements lined the altar. Classical music played softly. At least 200 people filled the pews, most of them my mother's, society friends, and business associates. I sat in the back row, alone. Vanessa spotted me almost immediately. Her face hardened, and she whispered something to Marcus. He turned and glared at me with bloodshot eyes. I looked away. During the eulogy, Vanessa stood at the podium in a black designer dress, every hair in place. Our mother was a woman of strength and principle, she said, her voice steady and practiced. She valued loyalty above all else. She raised us to understand that family comes first. She leaves behind 2 children who will honor her memory every day. 2 children, not 3. I sat there in my off-the-rack suit and felt every eye in the church on me. Some people knew what had happened. Others were probably wondering why the middle son was sitting alone in the back like a stranger. After the service, as people filed out to their expensive cars, my Aunt Caroline stopped me in the hallway. She was my mother's younger sister, a softer version of Margaret who'd always been kind to me. "I'm glad you came," she whispered, squeezing my hand. "Your father would have wanted you here." "Vanessa didn't," I said. Caroline's eyes were sad. "Vanessa isn't half the person you are, Ethan. Don't ever forget that." Then she was gone, swept up in the crowd. I walked to my car, feeling like I'd survived something, though I wasn't sure what. 1 week after the funeral, a certified letter arrived. I signed for it at the door, recognizing the return address immediately. Pemberton and Associates, attorneys at law. Inside was a formal notice on expensive letterhead. "You are required to attend the reading of the last will and testament of Margaret Eleanor Brooks. Date, October 15th. Time, 2 p.m. Location, Pemberton and Associates, 428 Maple Street." I stared at the letter in confusion. Sophie read it over my shoulder. "Why would they invite you if you're not in the will?" she asked. "I don't know. Maybe it's procedural. They have to notify all the children legally, even if I'm not getting anything. Or maybe," Sophie said slowly, "Vanessa wants to rub it in your face. Make sure you see exactly what you're not getting." I folded the letter and set it on the counter. "Either way, I'm going. And you're coming with me." "Damn right I am," Sophie said fiercely. The days until the reading crawled by. I taught my classes, coached debate practice, helped Lily with her homework. Normal life continued. But underneath everything was this low-grade anxiety, a constant awareness that something was coming. I just didn't know what. The night before the reading, I had a dream about my father. We were in his study at Willowmere, and he was showing me something in a leather folder. I couldn't read the words, but his face was serious. "Pay attention, son," he said. "This matters." I woke up sweating, my heart racing. Sophie stirred beside me. "Bad dream," she murmured. "I don't know yet," I whispered. The law offices of Pemberton and Associates occupied the 3rd floor of a downtown building that had probably been elegant 50 years ago. Now it was just old. Sophie and I arrived 15 minutes early and sat in the waiting room on leather chairs that creaked when we moved. Vanessa and her husband Bradley arrived next. Bradley was tall, polished, everything about him expensive from his watch to his shoes. He worked in corporate finance and had always looked at me like I was something he'd scraped off his heel. Vanessa wore a black suit that probably cost more than my monthly salary. She didn't acknowledge me. Marcus stumbled in 10 minutes late, wearing sunglasses indoors despite the overcast day. He reeked of cologne, trying to mask something else. When he took off the sunglasses, his eyes were red-rimmed. Harold Pemberton emerged from his office, looking older than I remembered. "Thank you all for coming. Please follow me." We filed into a conference room with a long mahogany table. Harold sat at the head, Vanessa and Bradley on one side, Marcus next to them, Sophie and I across from them, the table like a divide between warring countries. Vanessa leaned forward. "Why is Ethan here? He's not in the will." Harold's expression was carefully neutral. "Everyone named in the estate documents is required to attend." "He's not named," Vanessa insisted. Harold opened a folder. "Please, let's just proceed." Something in his tone made me sit up straighter. Sophie's hand found mine under the table. In that moment, I knew something was different. I just didn't know what yet. Harold adjusted his reading glasses and began. "I, Margaret Eleanor Brooks, being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament." The formal language washed over me. Estate valued at $6.8 million. That number made me blink. I'd known my mother was wealthy, but I hadn't realized how much. "To my daughter Vanessa Brooks Sterling," Harold read, I leave 60% of my estate, including the Willowmere property and all associated investment accounts. Vanessa's face remained composed, but I saw Bradley's hand twitch. Calculating already. To my son Marcus Brooks, I leave 40% of my estate, including all cash assets and remaining properties. Marcus nodded slowly, like he was trying to appear solemn while clearly relieved. To my son Ethan Brooks. Harold paused. In that pause, I heard my heart beating. Nothing. Due to actions that demonstrated disloyalty to this family. There it was. Official. Legal. My mother's final judgment on me, preserved in legal documents that would outlive us all. Vanessa smirked. Marcus had the grace to look uncomfortable. I sat still. I'd expected this. It still felt like being punched. Sophie squeezed my hand so hard it hurt. Then Harold said, however. Everyone's head snapped up. Harold pulled out a second folder from his briefcase. This one was older, the leather worn, sealed with red wax that had been broken but carefully preserved. There is a second will, Harold said quietly. Written by Robert Brooks in 2003. The room exploded. __. That's impossible. Vanessa was on her feet, both hands flat on the table. Dad's will was settled 20 years ago. Everything went to Mom. Harold remained calm, his voice steady like a judge reading a verdict. Robert's will contained a conditional trust. It was designed to activate only under specific circumstances. What circumstances? I heard myself ask. Harold looked directly at me. If Margaret Brooks ever formally disinherited any of Robert's children, the conditional trust would supersede her will and redistribute the estate according to Robert's wishes. The silence that followed was absolute. I could hear the clock on the wall ticking. Outside, a car horn honked 3 times. Vanessa's face had gone pale. That's illegal. You can't just override someone's will. It's completely legal, Harold replied. Robert structured it through an irrevocable trust established in 2003. Margaret had a life interest in the estate, but Robert retained testamentary power over final distribution. It's an unusual structure, but perfectly valid. Bradley leaned forward, his financial mind working. What does that mean in practical terms? It means, Harold said slowly, making sure we all understood, that your father's will now controls the distribution of the estate, not your mother's. Marcus looked confused. So what do we get? Harold's eyes moved to me. The bulk of the estate goes to Ethan. The room spun. Sophie's hand in mine was the only thing keeping me anchored to reality. Vanessa's face went from pale to red. This is fraud, she shouted. Harold pulled out another envelope. Your father left this for you, Ethan. To be opened only if the conditional trust activated. My hands shook as I took it. The envelope was heavy, expensive paper, cream-colored and slightly yellowed with age. My father's handwriting on the front. For Ethan. When you need it. I broke the seal. Inside was a single sheet of paper, dated March 2003, 2 months before my father died. Ethan, I read aloud, my voice barely steady. If you're reading this, it means your mother did what I feared she would. She punished you for having integrity. Vanessa made a noise of disgust. I kept reading. I've known Margaret for 30 years. I love her, but I see her clearly. She values image over truth. She'll protect Vanessa and Marcus no matter what they do, because they reflect well on her. You, my boy, reflect something more important. You reflect me. My throat closed up. Sophie's hand tightened on mine. I built a safeguard into my estate plan. If she ever disowned you, my will takes over. Not because I don't trust her, but because I trust you. I had to stop. Tears were blurring the words. Sophie took the letter gently from my hands and continued reading. The estate was always meant to be yours to steward. Not because you're better than your siblings, but because you'll do what's right with it. I'm proud of you, son. Even if she isn't. Love, Dad. The silence that followed was broken by the sound of me crying. I wasn't ashamed. My father had seen me. Across 20 years and death itself, he had seen me and protected me. Harold pulled out a handkerchief and handed it to me. Even he looked emotional. Vanessa stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. This is manipulation. This is him controlling us from a grave. This is him, Harold said quietly, protecting his son. Harold opened a new folder, this one thick with documents. Your father's will is very specific. Let me outline the distribution. He read slowly, making sure every word landed. To Ethan Brooks, the Willowmere estate in its entirety, including all buildings, land, and furnishings. The primary investment portfolio, currently valued at approximately $3.2 million. Final authority over all family trusts and foundations. My brain couldn't process the numbers. Willowmere, the house I'd grown up in, the house I'd been banned from for 2 years. To Vanessa Brooks Sterling and Marcus Brooks, the remaining cash assets, to be divided equally. This amounts to approximately $266,000 each, plus designated personal items. $200,000. Vanessa's voice was shrill. We get $200,000 while he gets everything. The estate your father controlled, yes, Harold confirmed. Marcus looked like he'd been slapped. But, Mom said. Your mother, Harold interrupted gently, didn't have final control. She thought she did. But your father's trust structure ensured that if she ever disinherited Ethan, his will would supersede hers. Bradley was on his phone, probably already calling his own lawyer. Vanessa was breathing hard, her perfectly applied makeup starting to crack around her eyes. There is one additional clause, Harold continued. If any beneficiary contests this will, they forfeit their inheritance entirely. The forfeited amount will go to charity, specifically the Children's Hospital Foundation. I found my voice. Did Mom know about this? The conditional trust. Harold nodded slowly. Yes. Your father told her when he wrote it. He warned her that if she ever disowned you, she'd lose control of the estate. He paused. She chose to do it anyway. That hit harder than anything else. She'd known, and her anger at me had been more important than millions of dollars. Vanessa was pacing now, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. There has to be a loophole. Bradley, tell them there's a loophole. Bradley had put his phone down, his expression grim. If the trust was properly structured. He looked at Harold. It was properly structured. By one of the best estate attorneys in the state, Harold confirmed. I reviewed it myself. It's airtight. So she'd left him even $1, Marcus said slowly, working it out. She would have kept control? Correct, Harold said. The conditional clause only activated because she removed Ethan completely. Vanessa spun toward me, her face twisted with rage. You planned this. You manipulated her into cutting you out. I haven't spoken to her in 2 years, I said quietly. I didn't even know this existed until 5 minutes ago. Bullshit. Vanessa slammed her hand on the table. You and Dad, you always had your little alliance. You turned him against us. That's not true, I said, but she wasn't listening. You know what? Fine. I'm contesting this. It's coercion. It's undue influence. I'll drag this through court for years if I have to. Harold's expression didn't change. Then you'll forfeit your $266,000. That stopped her. Bradley stood up, his voice sharp. Vanessa, don't. She turned on him. Don't tell me what to. We need that money. Bradley's mask had slipped. The firm is cutting partners. Your billable hours are down. We need that money. The perfect image cracked wide open. Vanessa's successful life, her perfect marriage, apparently not so perfect after all. I'm not contesting, Marcus said suddenly. He was looking at me, and for the first time in years, I saw my little brother instead of a stranger. I'm sorry, man. I really am. I didn't know what to say to that. Harold wasn't finished. He pulled out a USB drive, the kind that looked like it had been sitting in a drawer for years. Your father also left documentation. He wanted you to understand the full picture, Ethan. He plugged it into his laptop and turned the screen so we could all see. Folders. 3 of them. Labeled with our names. Harold opened Vanessa's folder first. Scanned documents. Emails. Bank statements. Your father paid $50,000 to resolve a plagiarism allegation during your final year at law school, Harold said. The university agreed to drop the investigation and seal the records. Vanessa's face went white. That's confidential. You can't. Your father documented it, Harold said, because he wanted the truth preserved. He opened Marcus's folder next. Police reports, court documents, medical bills. 4 DUI arrests over 10 years. Your father paid for attorneys, settlements with victims, court fees, rehab facilities. Total expenditure, approximately $208,000. Marcus was staring at the table. I hadn't known about most of those arrests. The family had kept them quiet. Harold opened the last folder. My mother's name. Margaret opened 3 secret credit card accounts between 1998 and 2003. She used them to fund a lifestyle your father didn't approve of. Country club dues, designer clothes, expensive trips with friends. She drained approximately $140,000 from his business accounts. He looked at each of us. Your father wanted you to know what he protected you from, and what you never thanked him for. The room was silent except for the sound of Vanessa crying. Not pretty crying. Ugly, gasping sobs. You can't show anyone these files, she finally choked out. Harold's voice was gentle but firm. I don't intend to, unless you contest the will. It was the perfect checkmate. My father had thought of everything. The meeting ended badly. Vanessa left without speaking to anyone, Bradley trailing after her. Marcus lingered near the door, looking like he wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. Finally, he just nodded at me and walked out. Sophie and I sat in Harold's office for another 30 minutes while he explained the logistics. There would be paperwork, transfers, tax implications. But the bottom line was clear. I now owned Willowmere and enough money to never worry about bills again. How long will it take? I asked. For the estate to fully transfer? About 6 months, if no one contests. Longer if Vanessa decides to fight despite the forfeit clause. Harold removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. He looked exhausted. Your father was my closest friend, Ethan. I've been holding this secret for 20 years. I'm glad it's finally out. Did you try to warn my mother? Sophie asked. When she was rewriting her will, Harold's expression was pained. I did. I told her explicitly that cutting Ethan out completely would trigger your father's trust. She told me she didn't care, that her pride was worth more than money. We drove home in silence. I felt numb, overwhelmed, like I'd been hit by a truck, but was too shocked to feel the pain yet. When we got home, Lily ran to the door. Did Grandma leave you something, Daddy? I picked her up and held her close. Yeah, baby. Grandma did. That night, after Lily was asleep, Sophie and I sat on the couch. She'd opened a bottle of wine, poured us each a glass. How do you feel? She asked. I don't know, I admitted. Grateful, angry, sad, vindicated. All of it at once. She clinked her glass against mine. To your father, who knew exactly what he was doing. To my father, I echoed. 2 days later, Harold called with the keys to Willowmere. Sophie and I drove out on a Saturday morning while Lily was at a birthday party. The long gravel driveway looked the same, lined with oak trees my great-grandfather had planted. The house stood proud in white, colonial architecture from 1890, wrapped in porches and history. I hadn't been here in 2 years. It felt like stepping into a memory. We walked through the rooms slowly, furniture covered in white sheets like ghosts. The air smelled faintly of my mother's perfume and furniture polish. In the living room, the grand piano where I'd taken lessons as a kid. In the kitchen, the table where we'd eaten thousands of meals. Sophie stayed close, her hand in mine. Upstairs, I pushed open the door to my old bedroom. They'd turned it into a guest room, erasing any evidence I'd ever lived here. But in the closet, I found a box. Old school papers, photos, a trophy from 8th grade basketball. In my parents' room, I found a photo on my mother's nightstand, half hidden behind a lamp. My parents' wedding day. They were young, laughing, my father's arm around her waist. She looked happy, really happy, before things got complicated. She loved him, Sophie said softly. Maybe, I said. But she loved being right more. In my father's study, everything was exactly as I remembered. His massive oak desk, still cluttered with papers despite 20 years of neglect. I opened the top drawer and found it, a birthday card I'd made him when I was 9. Crayon drawing of a baseball. To the best dad ever. He kept it. I sat in his chair and cried for the second time that week. Sophie stood behind me, her hands on my shoulders, and let me grieve for what was lost and what had been saved. Marcus showed up at my house 3 days later. I opened the door to find him on my porch, hands shoved in his jacket pockets, looking nervous. Can we talk? He asked. I almost said no. Then I saw how thin he'd gotten, the dark circles under his eyes, and stepped aside. Come in. We sat in the living room. Sophie made herself scarce, taking Lily to the park. Marcus sat on the edge of the couch like he might bolt at any second. I'm in trouble, he said finally. Real trouble. I waited. I owe money, a lot of money, to people who, he swallowed hard, to people who don't ask nicely for it back. I thought Mom's inheritance would fix it. Now I'm looking at $200,000 and it's not enough. Not even close. How much? I asked. $850,000. He couldn't meet my eyes. Gambling. I'm so stupid. I kept thinking I could win it back, and I just kept losing. Now they're threatening. He stopped. I need help. Alone. Anything. I know I don't deserve to ask. You're right, I said. You don't. He flinched like I'd hit him. You stood by while Mom tore me apart, I continued. You let Vanessa treat me like garbage. You sent me that text telling me I cost you your career. And now you want money. I'm your brother, Marcus whispered. You haven't acted like it in 2 years. Marcus started crying. Not manipulation tears. Real, ugly, scared crying. I know, and I'm sorry. I was terrified of her, of Mom. She'd cut me off if I sided with you, and I couldn't. I can't survive without help. I'm weak, Ethan. I'm not strong like you. I never was. I sat there looking at my little brother, seeing him clearly for maybe the first time. Not the golden child, not the screw-up. Just a scared man who'd never learned to stand on his own. I'm not giving you money, I said. His face crumpled. But I'll pay for rehab. Real rehab. Inpatient, 90 days. If you go, I'll cover it. If you finish the program, we'll talk about what comes next. But if you don't go, we're done. Completely. Marcus looked up at me with something like hope. You do that. You're my brother, I said. Even when you're not acting like it. 6 weeks later, the lawsuit arrived. Despite everything, despite the forfeit clause, Vanessa filed suit contesting the will. The allegations were wild. Undue influence, mental incompetence, fraud. Her attorney's arguments were desperate, grasping at straws. Harold called me at work. She's going to lose. And she'll lose her $266,000. Why is she doing this? I asked, genuinely confused. Pride, Harold said simply. She can't accept losing to you. The case made the local news. Prominent attorney challenges father's 20-year-old will. Vanessa's law firm placed her on leave. Bradley filed for separation. The perfect life Vanessa had built was collapsing. The deposition was brutal. Vanessa's attorney tried to paint me as manipulative, tried to suggest I'd controlled my father. Then Harold calmly introduced the evidence from the USB drive. The plagiarism scandal. The DUI cover-ups. The documentation of my father protecting them despite their mistakes. Vanessa's attorney went pale. During the break, I heard him arguing with her in the hallway. You didn't tell me about the plagiarism. You said your record was clean. It doesn't matter, Vanessa hissed back. It matters when you're claiming your father was irrational. By the end of the day, her attorney had withdrawn from the case. Vanessa tried to proceed pro se, representing herself, which is almost always a disaster. The trial lasted half a day. The judge reviewed my father's trust documents, the conditional clause, the proper legal structure. His ruling was swift and decisive. Mr. Brooks had every legal right to structure his estate this way. The condition is clear and unambiguous. The will stands. He looked at Vanessa. Furthermore, Ms. Brooks Sterling, by contesting this will, you have activated the forfeit clause. Your inheritance is now void. Vanessa made a sound like a wounded animal. No, you can't. I can and I have. Case dismissed. She left the courtroom in tears. I felt no satisfaction, just a deep, tired sadness. 6 months after the trial, life had settled into a new normal. Marcus was 2 months sober, living in a halfway house, working at a nonprofit that helped addiction recovery. He called me every Sunday. The conversations were awkward but honest. Vanessa had disappeared from social media. Through the family grapevine, I heard she'd lost her partnership, gotten divorced, moved into a small apartment across town. She was doing contract legal work. Surviving, not thriving. I'd started renovating Willowmere. Not to live in. Sophie and I loved our little house, but to turn part of it into something meaningful. A community education center. Free tutoring for kids whose families couldn't afford private help. Meeting rooms for local nonprofits. I was still teaching full-time, but this felt like a way to honor what my father had given me. Lily loved the gardens at Willowmere. On weekends, we'd go out there and she'd run through the grounds, playing hide and seek in the hedge maze, feeding the ducks at the pond. Sophie had started managing the administrative side of the education center, coordinating volunteers and scheduling programs. One Saturday, while I was up on a ladder painting one of the classrooms, my phone rang. Marcus. Hey, he said. His voice was stronger than it had been in years. I wanted to tell you something. I got a job. A real job. Youth counselor at the recovery center where I stayed. They offered me full-time. That's amazing, I said, and meant it. It's because of you, Marcus said quietly. You gave me a chance when I didn't deserve one. I'm not going to waste it. After we hung up, I stood on that ladder in the house my father had protected for me, and I felt something shift. Not forgiveness yet, but maybe the beginning of it. While cleaning out my mother's bedroom, preparing to convert it into office space for the education center, I found something tucked into her nightstand drawer. An envelope, addressed to me in her handwriting. Never mailed. My hands shook as I opened it. The letter was dated 3 weeks before her stroke. Ethan, it began. I've been too proud to say this, but your father was right. He was always right about you. I sat down on the edge of her bed, my heart hammering. I thought strength meant never admitting fault. I thought being right was more important than being kind. I was wrong. The handwriting got shakier toward the bottom. I'm sorry. I don't know how to fix what I broke, but I want you to know that I do see you. I always did. I just didn't know how to show it without losing face. I was going to call you tomorrow. I rehearsed what I'd say. But pride is a terrible companion, and it's kept me company for too long. By the time you read this, I hope I found the courage to send it. Your mother. But she hadn't sent it. 3 weeks later, she'd had the stroke. The letter had stayed in the drawer, in tension, without action. I read it 3 times. Sophie found me sitting there, tears running down my face. She was going to reach out, I said, showing her the letter. Sophie read it carefully. But she didn't. Does it matter? That she was going to. Sophie sat beside me, taking my hand. I don't know, honey. Does it matter to you? I thought about it for a long time. It helps, I finally said, knowing she had a moment of clarity. But intention isn't the same as action. She chose pride over me every day for 2 years. This letter, it's sad. But it doesn't change what happened. What are you going to do with it? Sophie asked. I folded it carefully and put it back in the envelope. Keep it. Not to torture myself, but as a reminder that people are complicated, even the ones who hurt us. 3 months later, Marcus came to Willowmere for dinner. The first time in 3 years he'd been back. He stood in the driveway for a full minute before getting out of his car, and I saw him wipe his eyes. Inside, Sophie had made lasagna. Lily chattered about her school play, showing Marcus the costume Sophie had helped her make. He listened with real attention, asking questions, laughing at her jokes. After dinner, Marcus and I walked through the gardens. The sun was setting, painting everything gold. "Thank you," Marcus said suddenly, "for not giving up on me. I know I was awful to you. All those years, I took Mom's side because it was easier. Because she had the money and the power, and I was scared to lose it." "I know," I said. "I'm 3 months sober now," he continued. "I go to meetings every day. I'm starting to see things clearly for the first time in my life. And one of the things I see is that you were always the strong one. Not because you were perfect, but because you did the right thing even when it cost you everything." We stood by the pond where we used to catch frogs as kids. "You think Dad knew?" Marcus asked. "That it would end up like this?" "I think he knew Mom," I said. "He knew she valued pride over everything. And he built a safety net for the person he knew would need it most." "He was protecting you even after he died," Marcus said, his voice full of wonder. "Yeah," I said. "He was." Marcus turned to me, his face serious. "I want to be better. Like you. Like Dad." "You're already becoming it," I told him. The Education Center opened on a sunny Saturday in April. We called it the Robert Brooks Community Learning Center. Sophie had organized everything perfectly: volunteers, programs, supplies. Local news covered it. 50 families showed up for the opening ceremony. I stood on the front porch of Willowmere, looking at all the people, and felt my father's presence so strongly it hurt. Harold Pemberton was there, retired now, but still sharp. Aunt Caroline came with her family. Even some of my mother's old friends attended, though they avoided eye contact with me. Vanessa didn't come. I'd sent her an invitation, but received no response. Part of me had hoped she might. The other part understood why she couldn't. Marcus stood in the back with his sponsor from AA. When our eyes met, he raised his hand in a small wave. I waved back. The mayor said a few words about community and education. Then it was my turn to speak. I stood at the microphone, looking at all these faces, and spoke from my heart. My father believed that integrity was the only inheritance that truly mattered. I began. He believed that doing the right thing wasn't always rewarded immediately. Sometimes it costs you everything. But in the end, it's the foundation you build your life on. I saw Sophie in the crowd, holding Lily's hand. They were both smiling at me. This center isn't about me or my family. It's about creating space for people to grow and learn. My father gave me that space. He protected my ability to stay true to myself even when it wasn't easy. This is how I passed that gift forward. After the ceremony, an elderly man approached me. He had kind eyes and a firm handshake. "I worked with your father 30 years ago," he said. "He talked about you all the time. Even when you were just a kid, he'd say, 'That one's got something special. He's going to change the world quietly.'" My throat tightened. He said that all the time. He was so proud of you. That evening, after everyone had gone home and the center was quiet, I walked through Willowmere alone. The house felt different now. Not haunted by the past, but inhabited by possibility. Children would learn here. Families would find help here. The rooms that had once held so much pain would now hold hope. In my father's study, I'd left everything mostly as it was. His desk, his books, his chair. I sat in that chair now and pulled out the unsent letter from my mother. I'd brought it here earlier, planning to frame it. I read it one more time in the fading light. "Your father was right. He was always right about you." Sophie found me there an hour later. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said. "I'm okay." "What are you thinking about?" "I'm thinking that Mom was broken," I said slowly. "She hurt me badly. She chose pride and image over her own son. But this letter shows she had a moment of clarity. She almost reached out. She almost chose differently. Is that enough?" Sophie asked. I thought about it. It's something. It's not nothing. It doesn't erase what she did, but it means she wasn't completely lost. She was just trapped by who she'd become. I stood up and placed the letter in a frame next to my father's photo on the desk. Not as forgiveness, but as acknowledgement. People are complicated, even the ones who hurt us most. "Ready to go home?" Sophie asked. I looked around the study one last time. "Yeah, let's go home." As we drove away from Willowmere, Lily asleep in the back seat, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not happiness exactly, but peace. The kind of peace that comes from knowing you've done right by the people who matter, even when it costs you everything. 1 year after the will reading, I received a letter. The return address surprised me. Vanessa. I opened it carefully. Inside was a single sheet of paper, her handwriting neater than usual, like she'd copied it out several times before sending the final version. Ethan, I don't expect you to forgive me. I treated you horribly for years. I enabled Mom's worst impulses. I stood by while you were erased from the family. I did it because it was easier, because I benefited, because my pride wouldn't let me admit I was wrong. I contested Dad's will knowing I'd lose my inheritance because I couldn't stand losing to you. It was petty and cruel. I've lost everything because of my choices. My marriage, my career, my reputation. I'm living in a one-bedroom apartment and doing contract work to pay rent. And you know what? I deserved every bit of it. I'm writing this not to ask for anything, but to say I finally understand what Dad saw in you. You had integrity when it cost you everything. I had pride and it cost me the same. The difference is your choice made you stronger and mine made me smaller. I don't expect a response. I just wanted you to know that I see you now. I finally see you. Your sister, Vanessa. I read the letter twice, then showed it to Sophie. Are you going to write back? She asked. Eventually, I said. Not yet. She needs time to sit with her choices. But eventually. That Sunday, Marcus came for our weekly dinner. It had become a tradition. He was 6 months sober now, thriving at his job, talking about maybe going back to school. As we sat around the table, me, Sophie, Lily, and Marcus, I thought about my father's letter from 20 years ago. The estate was always meant to be yours to steward. I'd thought he meant the money and property. Now, I understood he'd meant something bigger. The values, the integrity, the responsibility to do right by people even when they don't deserve it. Looking at Marcus across the table, laughing at one of Lily's stories, I saw redemption. Not earned, but offered. Not because he'd paid back every hurt, but because that's what family should do. My mother said I was no longer family. For 2 years, I believed her. But the reading of the will didn't just give me an inheritance. It gave me the truth. My father saw me. He protected me. He knew that integrity was the only currency that truly mattered. Willowmere wasn't just a house now. It was proof that love can protect, even from beyond death. That doing right doesn't always feel good in the moment, but it builds something that lasts. My father knew that. And now finally so did I. The center was thriving. Marcus was healing. Even Vanessa had found the courage to face the truth. None of it was perfect, but it was real. And it was enough. That night, after everyone had gone home, I stood in my father's study one last time. I touched the frame, holding my mother's unsent letter and my father's photo. Thank you, I whispered to the empty room, for seeing me when no one else did. The house was quiet, but in that silence, I felt my father's answer. Not in words, but in the peace that settled over me like a blanket. I'd been disowned, erased, judged unworthy. And in the end, that rejection had saved me, because it activated a protection built on love that was stronger than pride, deeper than money, more lasting than bitterness. My mother said I was no longer family. The reading of the will proved I was the only one who ever truly was. And that made all the difference.